Okay, so our speaker today is Zihan, who is a third-year PhD student here and has been working on forest monitoring and using, I guess, drones and so on for the last couple of years. And this is a paper that is under submission somewhere. And
At GCV.
at GCV.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's yours. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Not sure whether you can see the title here, but okay. So today my talk is like a continuation of a talk I gave a few months ago, but this is like a more complete version, scaling up forest vision with synthetic data, and I'm going to introduce the CAMP3D pipeline dataset we have just developed. So the CAMP3D stands for Cambridge Arboreal Modeling Panoptic. I'm going to explain what it means. How to monitor forest status? Forest can be monitored at different trade-offs. So mainly three dimensions like accuracy, cost, and spatial coverage, depending on from which position you do the monitoring. If you do the field measurements, it's the most accurate way maybe, but it can be very time-consuming, very costly. If you do the satellite remote sensing, it covers a broad range, but the resolution will decrease. And the close range sensing sits as the middle of this sensing pipeline. Typically, you will have these drones or airplanes that do the sensing, and it has mainly two important applications. One is precise forest management because it provides like a good balance between accuracy, cost, and spatial coverage. It's also very important for satellite remote sensing to provide the ground reference data for the calibrations. And the platform, as I just mentioned, can be like a mobile or terrestrial drones and airplanes. But drones is getting more and more popular recent years because it's very handy to use and very cost effective. The sensor can be RGB camera, then the data you capture will be RGB image or RGB image with steps. But another very important type of sensor is the laser scanner. What you will capture, as you can see in the lower right, is the point cloud, and that's what you will get. So I mentioned that close range for sensing is a very important way of sensing, but what are people really interested in, right? So for the ecologists, what they are really interested in is cave forest properties. Imagine that you have an individual tree, right? What they want to extract, here I'll give you some examples, like the canopy height and the diameter and breast height. These are very important for the metabolic scaling and allometry studies for the forest. So people can use this to also to estimate the above ground biomass, which is very important for carbon estimation. But beyond carbon estimation, you can also measure, let's say, the species of the trees. So you know have a statistics of the species of forest, you know the biodiversity. Also like the crown area and crown volume are very important for understanding the canopy gas exchange, like how the crown is expanding in response to the methane or CO2 and other things. So all are very important for understanding the ecosystem functions. That said, all these properties depends on whether you can first accurately segment of this individual tree. So individual tree segmentation is really essential for deriving all the key properties and really a bottleneck for all the pipeline. So how have we advanced so far in these tree segmentation algorithms? So of course, like algorithm matters. You have seen like the whole history of AI, like just from my very short amount of time, lifetime engaging with this time during my undergraduate studies, many works is some research, blah, 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 based on support vector machine. So that's how I know SVM during my master's is mainly like convolutional neural networks. And now you have transformers. So algorithms get more and more powerful. You have more and more parameters. The architecture gets more and more complicated. But as Rich Sutton mentioned in one of his very popular essays, a breakthrough progress eventually arrives on opposing approach based on scaling computation by search and learning. So I think algorithm is not the only factor that matters. To support the more and more complicated architecture and parameter learning, you also need other pillars. Namely, I think like hardware, you have more and more GPUs for the computation, but you also need the data, right? Data is really the fuel of this whole engine to support its running. So we really need high quality data to scale with the computation cost effectively with machine learning. Then the question comes like, in the field, close range sensing to train tree segmentation algorithms, do we have enough data? By data, I don't mean that by just flying a drone to collect tons of data, but that the data that has been labeled, cleaned, machine learning ready, that you can directly use to for production. And forest is extremely challenging for collecting this data because it represents all those things. So it's not like many like indoor scenes, which is a controlled, simple scene structure. The auto condition can vary much. And also the forest scenes has a very complicated structures, which means that once you have scanned the data, the alignment and cleaning will take time to process. So the consequence is that annotating tree point clouds can be really expensive and time consuming. So here are some prominent examples of publicly available machine learning ready 3D data sets for forest remote sensing. Left is Western Woods terrestrial LiDAR scanning. It's covered about 800 trees and about 1 hectare, and it has the instance labels. On the right is the 4-instance data set, which is a UAV laser scanning data set. It's a broad collaboration from different teams over the globe and cover a bunch of locations, but it only covers like 2.79 hectares. And annotating just this 4-instance data set takes about 6 months by a team of 2 skilled researchers. So you can imagine how time consuming it can be. And despite all these efforts, this compared to all the other machine learning data sets used in NLP or computer vision research, it still falls short of the skill that required for the robust learning. And so what are we going to do, right? We don't have, the data is really important, but collecting the data is very, very time consuming, and the skill is still fall short for the robust learning. So I think like real or unreal, that is the question. Whether it's real data we keep working on to clean and label, or we take some alternative to against a sea of troubles. And there's another thing. So unfortunately, like, the future is already here, right? We do have some alternatives, but it's just not evenly distributed. If you look into other vision domains, people don't completely rely on real data. Synthetic data in other vision domains have been achieving some very successful applications. This is due to the advance of the graphics engine, like the Unreal Engine. If you have played some video games, you will see that currently the graphics engine is very capable of rendering stuff, very authentic scenes. And some prominent application in other vision domains, for instance, is this, like in the indoor scenes, people will create synthetic scenes of the furnitures at different positions and then render the data and train the robots like to learn the policies for the indoor scene manipulation. Also, another very important application is the self-driving, where people have this control all those things and then render this vision data to do the training. Because for some data, for some things, it's very difficult to have in the real world, right? You want to have the self-driving to be very safe, but you can't expect that in the real world you have many accidents. Well, that's not an ideal case, right, to collect this data, but it's possible through synthetic data. So can we apply similar approach to forest? That's a very interesting question to explore, I think. So first, we need to consider how we generate these virtual forest scenes, right? And I already mentioned the Unreal Engine, graphics engine. So how can we generate the scenes, forest scenes, photorealistic, but at large scale? And there's a very interesting algorithm currently from the game industry, which is called procedural footage generation, that can generate large-scale forest scenes, which is photorealistic but with very limited set of tree models. Here is how it works in a high level. So you first have a content pack about which is like playing Lego games. You have some bricks to build these things. You have basic tree models, and you have some parameters to control how these forest scenes can be generated. And it basically can be have two groups. The first group of parameters is about a dispersal. So you first disperse some seed across the scene, and then you decide how you are going to spawn each tree on the seed. And when you spawn the trees, you have the random scaling and rotation of the trees that will bring in some variance of the scene. And when you spawn this tree, there will also some parameters like a collision radius or shadow radius. Shadow radius and collision radius that is related to how the different trees can compete with each other depending on the resource constraints or lab completion. And then you decide do some pruning, and then you have some tree. Okay, this is the first run, right? Imagine you have a background, you have some seeds, and you spawn the trees, and you finally decide which trees can exist given the resource constraints. As the next step, based on the existing trees, you keep spawning more seeds, and you keep repeating this circle, and finally you can have a forest. So many of these parameters, it's very interesting that many of these parameters have some physical meanings that is very interpretable directly according to the ecology literatures about people study how forests can grow given the resource and light constraints. Despite like this algorithm is originally developed and mainly used in the game industry, but here we repurpose this for the ecology research. So here we will give an example about the forest scenes created. This is work we have done before with Frank, the synthetic photorealistic Unreal dataset. Here we collected the forest from existing Unreal Engine game scenes, but mainly for the 2D applications. Namely, we generate the segmentation mask from the 2D case. But here you can see like the forest scenes generated using this procedural foliage algorithm. It's very photorealistic. Okay, we have this 2D application. How are we going to have this 3D data, right? Here I want to introduce another simulator, which is also thanks to the advance of the community called Helix, which is developed by Heidelberg, which is a LiDAR operation simulator. It's quite a good fit for this forest survey task because it contains the different scanning models and platforms that is typically used in the forest survey. So you can simulate how the UAV laser scanning works, how the terrestrial laser scanning works. They also contain the common used models like RIGO that people is used in the real world. And how it works typically, the simulator is a ray tracing method. You first have this 3D scene and you voxelize the 3D scene into a certain voxel. And you do the ray tracing by shooting a ray, which can be seen as a laser pulse. And this ray will intersect with like the voxel. And this voxel will have some properties like the instance ID or semantic ID or any other things you can customize or you are interested in. But anyway, what this simulator do is I will shoot a ray, it will intersect with this voxel, and the attributes from this intersection will be recorded as a data point, like the X, Y, Z coordinates together with some attributes. So that's how the simulation is done. So we have now this Unreal Engine that can give us large-scale diverse things. We'll now also have this simulator that can possibly do this laser scanning, but how can we combine these two, right? So here is how my work step in. I developed a synthetic data generation pipeline that can combine the advances of both the Unreal Engine for diverse forest scenes and also this Helix to allow you to do this realistic laser scanning. And the thing is, it basically contains, I think, 4 main steps. So first you export the forest scenes from Unreal Engine. They have certain data formats. Then you need to decide what kind of labels I want to have. Based on the properties that is provided from the gaming assets, it's possible to further customize. I think the instance labels is totally possible, but also like the semantic labels. Like, okay, these are trees, and this is ground, and this is like tree 1, tree 2, tree 3. So these are like the instance labels, and these are the semantic labels. So you have the scene created in the Unreal Engine, then you need to customize the labels. And given the spatial extent, we need to do the LiDAR survey. This is really similar to how the drone is flying in the real world. So we need to do the survey planning to decide what scanning model we need to have, what should be the flight path, and what the flight speed was. I mean, many other parameters like the laser force, things like that. And after that, you need to convert all the files to a data structure that is readable by the simulator. And it will read the data, converted data, also the survey file you have generated, and to do the simulation, like by shooting the ray and the intersection point will show you, okay, this is the point, and this is semantic and unstable of this point. And after you're getting all the data, you need to merge all the data together and split them into like a standard size plot, and then you have the synthetic data ready to use. So I described all the whole pipeline, and I have written this into a Python package, so you can just install, and all these steps I have just mentioned can be executed with a single command line. And this is a data file we have generated using the pipeline I have just created. So we have been trying to search like the good quality forest assets available from Unreal Engine marketplace. And in total, we have collected like 12 forest scenes. The first 5 are the forest scenes that are already collected from Sprite, and we adapted, regenerated here to use it. And we have also added 7 more forest scenes here. So you can see it covers both conifers and deciduous forest. And every forest type is a standard like 250 and 250 meter size. So we divide them into 30 plots, 25 plots, about each plot is 50 by 50 meters. But in total, we have 75 hectares of data. This is beyond the size of any real world data you can have. So this is a web check to see how the synthetic data we have generated looks like. So the first row is a coniferous 2, which is coniferous scene. On the left column is the rendered view. And this on the right is the simulated data of the UAV laser scanning using our pipeline, and with the instance labels. So every different color distinguish which tree this belong to. And this is the native view. So we have coniferous, deciduous, we also have the rainforest.
I think it would be worth mentioning based on the previous, it will be 50% years to actually label this from real world, because it was for 3 hectares, two people, or whatever. So this is 30 times the picture.
Yeah.
Sorry, 25 times the bigger.
Yeah.
I have just a quick question, just because I haven't done so much LiDAR work myself. I noticed in my simulations that the forest canopy or the forest floor level, it's quite sparse. There isn't a lot of understory. And I know that LiDAR typically doesn't reach super well to forest floor, but there are many cases where there can be actually quite a dense understory that can impact rating. So I'm curious if there was also a simulation of richer understory, or if this wasn't so important for the study.
I think it's completely possible. In the end, I will talk about how to expand our pipeline. So if you change the survey mode from UAV laser scanning to mobile laser scanning or terrestrial, it's possible to have a very good understory. But because here is like the UAV laser scanning, so the understory could be sparse, just as what happens in the real world.
I wasn't sure if you were taking questions in the middle, but so this is an arbitrary square area of forest that you're simulating, right? You're not.
Yeah.
There might be interest, I guess, at some point in the past, the UK was covered in forest, so there's no constraint to hit something like a constraint, like sea or a cliff. So, but are there things that happen near that edge that might be interesting? So it'd be interesting to see if you can put in borders that are not just we're going to do a square number of hectares, but we can do something that's bounded by, it could be altitude, you just go above the tree line, right, in the mountain. So it could be a cliff or sea or river or something.
Yeah.
But it might be that you want to simulate a resource change, which is not just an edge, it's like some gradient or something. Maybe.
Yeah. So currently our experiment is like based on some idea we call like invariance, like by pursuing the diversity of under the same settings, we can see whether it can improve that algorithm. But if you are interested in a region of particular interest, maybe you can consider whether I can create a certain forest of the high covariance with the region of the text. That could be a way. So okay, I talked a lot about the forest, but how are we going to validate effectiveness of synthetic data? I'm going to introduce some experiments we are going to run. So first, I think we need a real data set to compare with, right? I already mentioned this, for instance, data set. So here's some more details of this data set. It contains both the coniferous and deciduous region, but you can see that the number of training plots available is dominated by the coniferous end, because this data set is collected by a team from Norway, and N is like something related to Norway. So they have a lot of data from this region and then they converse. And they also have like one or two plots from other regions. Nibio 2 is supplementary data from following works, but just for completeness, we also include this Nibio 2 data together for the evaluation. And here is another web chart for the real data that people have collected. And you can see this the conifers and on the bottom the deciduous. And actually for the deciduous R and deciduous T, what you have seen now is all available plots for this deciduous forest to train. And we also need a sort of algorithm to train on different data set and evaluate. So here is an algorithm called for AINet, and it's mainly designed for the tree segmentation. And it's also originally developed for using this real world, for instance, data set, which make it ideal for us to run and compare. Just a high level about this algorithm. So first, it has a backbone, which is convolutions, sparse convolution 3D, to extract the features from the original points. And then it is followed by multiple arms. So mainly two arms. One is the semantic branch, another is the instance branch. So the semantic branch will predict the semantic labels for every point based on the input features. And the instance branch will predict the instance labels from the input features for every point. So together they form like a, in terms of task, together they form a panoptic segmentation task, meaning that the algorithm need to not only just segment every individual trees, but for the segment instance, they need to give the semantic labels. From the learning point of view, it forms a multitask learning setting, which means that you learn multitask together, and the semantic labels and instance labels can inform each other to help to boost the performance. Imagine that you not only have the instance labels, but you also have very fine-grained semantic labels. Then it will help the algorithm to better learn the structure of the forest, which can also boost the performance of the instance segmentation. So here is the case for the how the for instance algorithm is developed, because although we focus on the instance segmentation, but originally the for instance data set contains 5 semantic labels, which is very, very detailed, but this is not very common for many forest data set. So they have this semantic branch that predict 5 semantic labels for the tree, like left branch, dead branch, stem, low vegetation, ground, and they also have the instant branch. But because the synthetic data we have generated, I have just shown you before, only contain like 2 semantic labels given the given data set. So like a tree and ground. So here we just run like a reduced setting of the semantic branch by mapping the semantic prediction to have only 2 labels. So here is the modification we have done to the previous algorithm. And okay, we have the algorithm, we have the real data, we also have the synthetic data. And I think the interesting point when we have large-scale synthetic data is that it's possible we can experiment with the learning paradigm of future learning. So because we have this synthetic forest plots, so that we can do the pre-training on the synthetic forest plots and do the fine-tuning on the real forest plots. Fine-tuning means that you don't have to have too many real forest plots to fine tune with, because the assumption is that the real forest plots is very difficult to get and very expensive to label. So we create some few shot data sets from the real data. Here's some explanation of the notations. So the first subscript, like 6, is 6 scenes, right? And second subscript, like 42, is like 42 plots. So we have a real data. That's the first row is all full-scale real data with like 6 scenes, 42 plots. And based on this, we create some few shot data sets. Like this C33 is like 3 coniferous scenes, and everything has only 1 plot, so like 3 plots. And you can further have the data set with fewer plots, like this CN11 is like only this 1 single coniferous scene with only 1 single forest plot. So this is even more extreme case. And similarly, we can create this data set for the deciduous forest. And here I show you like the percentage of the data samples, and we is every data set have compared to the full scale data set. As you can see, the list data set take only like about 2.2% of the real data set. And okay, we have designed the environments, but does it work, right? So here I want to show you some results from the future experiments. So first, we found that synthetic data can enhance the instance segmentation. So here are the results, right? If you see the first row is the test on a single forest scene, like this coniferous N. And we have pre-trained on, so the first 2 rows, like just train on the real data, right? If you only train the full scale real data, you get the F1 score, which is about 79.8. And when we reduce this to a few shot setting, let's say it contains only 3 forest plots, like these coniferous plots, and you train from scratch, and you can see that the F score drops from 79.8 to 50.5. But if you pre-train the model on our synthetic data, like the full-scale synthetic data that contains both coniferous and deciduous plots, and you fine-tune this on the same few shot data set, like these 3 coniferous plots, and you will see that the F1 score is boosted to a level that is similar to training from scratch on the real data. And surprisingly, if you fine-tune the model only from like just 1 single plot, right, you can still achieve quite comparable metrics compared to training with a full-scale data set. Yes, this few shot data can represent only as little as 2.2% of the labeled data sets. Here is some qualitative results. I think for the algorithm work, what's really important is about to learn a good embeddings, because the segmentation results is basically retrieved from the embeddings. So you first have this embedding branch that will project the original point features into a latent space, and then you run the clustering algorithm on these embeddings. Then based on these clusters, you got these segmentations. So here I present a data sample from forest region, coniferous N, where embedding some points are shifted after the learning. So you can see that, by the way, the embedding is a high dimension, but I just remap this to 2D dimension using UMap. And you can see that you train only, let's say you have the ground truth, right? What's the difference? You have these understory trees here. And if you train on the full scale real data set, okay, no problem. It can cluster this understory trees. And in the latent space, the embeddings corresponding to corresponding to this understory tree is quite disentangled from other embeddings, right? But if you only train on these 3 coniferous plots, you see that this embedding is the model struggles to learn a more disentangled representation. But if you pre-train the model with our synthetic data and fine-tune on these 3 coniferous plots, you see that you have this the model will be able to have a representation that's similar to the training on the full-scale data, and correspondingly, when you run the clustering, it will be successfully detect these understory trees. And similar pattern can be observed when you pre-training our model and fine-tune on this single plot. But what are the keys that contributing to its effectiveness, right? Why is the synthetic data can't work? Here's a quite interesting question. In fact, let's consider the point clouds, how we can get the point clouds. The point clouds can actually be obtained in a simpler way, right? I mentioned that we use the tree assets from the game engine. So every tree is actually like a tree model consists of textures and static mesh. And a static mesh is actually consists of vertices and edges, right? And by taking these nodal points from this static mesh, you can already get point clouds, right? And by the way, on the rightmost is like the virtual laser scan we obtained using our pipeline, which also extended to the Helio simulator. But you can ask, like, why is it necessary to have this data pipeline since you can already have all these point clouds from these tree meshes? So this is quite interesting to explore. And also there's other factors like what's the effect of adding more diverse things? What's the effect of adding more data? So to investigate into the key elements that could contribute to the effectiveness of synthetic data, here we again created some data science to run some ablation experiments. So the first is like all four scenes which contain 20 plots, but is obtained directly from nodal points. And the second one, the same scene, same plots, but we just change a different way of simulation using the physics-based simulation using Helios. And the third row is that everything still contains 5 plots, but we're just extending the scenes from 4 scenes to 11 scenes. So we're just adding 11 more scenes. Mostly it's like the coniferous scene because the original 4 scenes is meant like deciduous. Here we're going to add more coniferous scenes. And the third row is about we still have the same number of scenes, let's say 11 scenes, but for every scene, we're extending the simulated plots from 5 plots to 17 plots per scene. So in total, we will have 187 plots. So this data set will be designed to validate how every element will contribute to the effectiveness of synthetic data. And here are some results. So if you see, here's the validation results on a single like coniferous plot. You see that if we change the data set from nodal points, which we can easily obtain from the existing tree assets, to the LiDAR simulation, there's a quite significant boost on the F1 score from 5.4 to 42.6. I guess this may be because if you do the retracing based way to get this point clouds, the point clouds is much denser, and also it's aligned with the pattern of the UAV laser scanning. And also, when you increase the scene diversity, especially with the newly included coniferous scenes, because the previous data set doesn't have any coniferous scenes, the boost effect is also very significant, increasing from 42.6 to 81.5. And when you have more data based on the existing scenes, it will also increase the performance. But it seems that the most significant gains obtained from the first and second part. So overall, we found that the physics-based simulation, scene diversity, and large data set scale can all contribute to the effectiveness of synthetic data. And more importantly, if you have another region you want to test, maybe our generated data cannot satisfy your needs based on these 3 dimensions. But all these 3 factors are achievable with our data pipeline. So you can reuse our data pipeline to generate the data set you need and do the scaling along according to these 3 dimensions. And here's another like qualitative check. So on the leftmost, you have the ground truth. If you train only on the nodal points, you see that the embeddings can't disentangle with each other much. and the results of the segmentation that many trees are just clustered as a single tree together. And when you have turn on the LiDAR simulation, you see some effects like a representation get a bit more disentangled, but when you have more diverse things, especially with more coniferous trees, because the scene alignment, the representations corresponding to the different trees in latent space get very disentangled, which make it easy to get a good segmentation results. And similarly for the more data. Yeah, that's basically I think the main results I want to present. Here are some further work. Welcome your suggestions and also your contributions. So the first thing that I introduced the results in reduce the setting of running with 2 semantic labels I've just mentioned, but the real world data actually contain 5 semantic labels. So how can we bridge the domain gaps with mixed training? So here in my paper, I did some experiments like by training with both the original real data with 5 semantic labels and my synthetic data with only 2 semantic labels. So what you need to do in the change is that for the real data, for the semantic height, you just predict 5 semantic labels. But for our synthetic data, you just remap that to 2 semantic labels because we don't have the information. The assumption is that by adding more data, it should boost the performance, right? But it's very surprising that in our experiments, when testing on the test region from synthetic data, our model trained on the mixed data only achieves the results that is comparable with the state of the art, not without exceeding it. It could be, I think, 2 possible causes. The first one is that, the performance can really be boosted when you have more fine-grained labels, right? If you only have 2 labels, you won't have much. Another possible reason is that because the test region and the training region are from the same real data set. So the test set and the real data set are from same regions. If you train on the full-scale real data set, perhaps the performance can already saturate a bit on the real data set, on this test region. So maybe if you test in another region, the performance you could see like how the algorithm could generalize. And another dimension thing is to improve the reusability of real-world label data. I think collecting real-world data is still very important because currently all our development is based on the tree assets that are mainly developed for gaming purposes. Although they also aim at for like the structural realism, but it's still different from like the requirements from forest survey. Right? Say I have a particular region I'm interested. I'm only interested in a certain set of species. It's not a guarantee that from the gaming industry they will produce everything you need, right? But our big pipeline has this like a content pack. But can we, based on this content pack, to create like a library of tree assets from existing laser scans that people have been producing in this field. So on the right, I'll give you an example, right? So this is for instance 20K data set where they can turn about 20K like an individual tree laser scans. So while it's possible to convert these tree assets to the tree meshes, and that is ready to be used with our data generation pipeline. So you can use the existing laser scans as tree assets, or first convert that to tree assets that can be rendered, and then generate the forest things that you need, and then do the data simulation. So this will increase, I think, the reusability of real-world label data, because currently people are just, I think, repeating the same work basically from one region to another region. If they need the data for the other region, they just redo all the scanning and then redo the labeling. But what if the other region has a similar composition of tree species? You can just use this as a library and recreate the forest scenes for that region. I think this is similar to what John just mentioned. Like if you have a particular region of interest, you can create this. Also, you can expanding the synthetic data generation using our pipeline because the simulator itself allows you to do that. But what you need to do in this pipeline is that in addition to the how you would find the UAV laser scanning, you also need to plan the mobile laser scanning or terrestrial laser scanning. So first, I think we can add more diverse things. If you look into like how work is being done in the self-driving, some very successful simulator like Kala. They typically have a model zoo, which is like they have scene zoo. So future researchers to generate the forest scenes, to do the synthetic data, if they want to generate the synthetic data for their own use, they don't have to recreate the forest scenes. They don't have to be worried about how to use the Unreal Engine. They're just like a scene zoo of different scenes you can choose and use. So whether it's possible to, I think it's possible that we create more diverse scenes and also create like forest scene zoo. People can just, okay, these scenes are more interested, I want to use this, I can choose this scene and run this pipeline, get this data set. But this also requires efforts from the whole community. Also, you can expand the survey modes because currently the pipeline only supports UAV laser scanning. But it's also possible to do the path planning for terrestrial laser scanning or mobile laser scanning. Let's say if people are more interested in dense point thoughts on the understory level, so maybe they are more interested in the mobile laser scanning. So it can be expanded to different survey modes. Also, it can include like more fine-grained semantics because currently we only use like the gaming assets, right? The most fine-grained level semantics, here is a data set I have generated on the lower right panel. I think it just leaves branch and ground. So three level semantics. But what if people have more interest on a more fine-grained semantics? They need to study some forest dynamics. I don't know. But if there's a need, we hope there could be more customized tree assets that people can use. But anyway, here is the most fine-grained labels data set I have generated. If you are interested in using that, you can still download and use that. Yeah, you are very welcome to contribute. So the pipeline I have introduced is available on my GitHub repo, and it's installable as a paid package. I think we have some time. Maybe I can show you a demo.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And
maybe we should have some questions and then yeah, let's do. Okay, let's thank you. Yeah. Well, okay. Do you have any questions from the room? Maybe I have not a question, more of a suggestion. I mean, I noticed that you have everything in the leaf on condition, right?
Yeah.
You know what forest dynamics obviously is a phenological dynamics looking at over the course of the year. So you have small leaves, full leaves, and a leaf off condition for deciduous anyway, right?
Yeah.
Even for coniferous, you have the sort of with cones, without cones condition, etc. So I was wondering, if you want to actually look at these phenological changes, one thing that we relatively easily do because you have the phenology controls, is to just have those in your scenes. We could have actually deciduous trees, in springtime, in summer, in autumn, winter, and just have those, because then you get actually all of that technology.
Yeah, I think it's possible for some very high quality gaming assets.
Yeah.
They have customized the properties of the asset, how it will change. I think mostly what I have seen is for the 2D applications, like the 2D rendering, how the tree leaf color will change.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm not sure how it can be used in the
3D.
You
can't get leaf on condition for the trees.
I'm not sure whether it's that flexible. I think usually it's just like you have. Technically, it should be possible.
I mean, if you want to have a game scene where somebody is going through a forest in winter, you want the leaves to be off. It would be very silly to have snow on the ground and all the leaves.
Yeah, I think there's something to note. I didn't mention in the talk. I mean, all these things we have discussed so far is mainly for like ecologists to use, like scientific purpose. But all these things are primarily produced for gaming purposes. Yes. So the primary goal is photorealism. Many things you see, okay, it's quite realistic change in the 2D view. It's they play some tricks in the 3D in order to have this good 2D view. So like the tree leaves, if you Unreal Engine can render your highly detailed forest scene, but this is through some technology called nanite, which is some customization by setting the different transparency of the materials. So if the material is like the branch part of the material attached to the 3D static mesh, we will have a low transparency. The gaps between the different leaves will have a high transparency, but the leaves and branches will have low transparency. But if you look into the 3D modeling, it can be a low quality mesh, but just the whole patch of materials attached to the whole part. But it is just set the different transparencies. So when you visually look like kind of realistic.
So it looks good, but it actually is not the real.
Yeah, it's because it's primarily developed for
I
game.
have a game idea, which could be fun, which is predators and prey types of birds flying through the forest, and you have to figure out what you choose to be a predator or prey, so you can fit between the branches of the different kinds of trees. So you choose the forest type, and then you choose you're going to be a wren escaping from a hawk, and that choice will matter if the tree branch density is a certain, and the smaller bird will be able to flip through all of them. And this could be quite fun. And it will test the realism of your branch structure and distribution amongst all different trees. And then you decide how fast can the different birds fly. So that would see, could they hit.
And the thing is, he's not producing those assets. We just purchase them, so it's not really.
Okay.
So the hope is that more people
sell the idea to them in exchange for free.
I think the hope is that if more people is interested in this approach, maybe another community in addition to the gaming community can take this seriously. Because they say, oh, we need to have our own library of tree assets that will fit our own research needs. Yeah.
Go see a student. So
Okay, great. Are there any questions online? Okay, thanks. Okay, maybe you wanted to do the demo then.
Okay. Let's see. Right. Okay, so if you are interested in using this data generation pipeline, I have created like a GitHub you can download. It will be available as CAMP3D. And what I included in this CAMP3D is first the code to do all the like heavy lifting from the scene conversion and the data simulation processing, etc. But also I included a very basic demo, which contains only one single tree. So it's very light and easy to install. You can install and run with this quick demo to see how it works. So if you first look into this README files, so after you download this, you can run this full pipeline. What it will do is like the step one, it will install the package and dependencies. Currently, I have not released this on the pip, but you can run this pip install. First download this GitHub repo and then run this pip install CAMP3D. Then you will have this pipeline installed. But the prerequisite is that you also need to have Blender and Helios installed. And then it will install check all the dependencies and environments. And what you exported from the Unreal Engine is this like these FBX files, like these trees and other things. So you create this forest in Unreal Engine, you export this as FBX files, and then this you can proceed with this pipeline to run the scene conversion and simulation. And you so you currently have this, and you call this run. So it will first like install the package and dependencies, and and then it will install the demo. The demo will appear in this. Okay, it says it successfully run this. Install this one. And yeah, it will run just the full pipeline in the quick demo, but it will install this demo things like this landscape FBX, and then it will create like the Blender files by like you see the newly generated file, right? By converting the FBX file to the Blender file. In the Blender file, it can do the customization of the semantic and instance labels, and then it will generate, let's say, the data. Then it will convert all the data to the different scene parts, like the trees. It needs to convert this to the OBJ file and other file format that is needed for the simulation. And it will also generate like all these files is the files required in order to run the simulation. And this is like the survey file is very important because if you want to do the UVV laser scanning, you need to give the constraints how the drone should fly and in which speed, what the laser pulse, things like that. So it generates this file. And like as you can see in the lower right panel, it's now running the simulation. So we can take a look of this. I think I can directly open the created Blender file. We can take a look.
Here's the tree.
So you have this tree, but you see, this is a tree I have created in Unreal Engine, exported and re-imported in the Blender. But what's the difference is that you see on the right, it has been the different parts of the tree have been grouped to different collections according to their semantics. Because in the Unreal Engine, you have this material. Let's say if you have a tree material, like a wood material attached to the tree assets, then we can separate the assets based on the materials attached to the tree assets. If you have a wood material, we can also do the separation. But that's the most fine-grained thing I think we can get so far for most of the tree assets. You also have these labels. And if you look at the, sorry, you look at the lower column, like the customized properties, it will also add like the high use part ID and the instance ID. So for the different high use part, let's say for the leaf and the wood, it has the same ID, which means that they belong to the different semantics, but they belong to the same instance. So all these can be read by the simulator when you run this. And we can take a look of the generated tree points. I preloaded this generated. So basically, like you, it's really like how the real world simulation works is that you have these outputs. Like this is the simulation I have run at different dates. This is the thing we have been just running now. So the planning patterns, if you still remember my class, is like the crisscross, but you can also change the patterns. If you have the crisscross, it will run the simulation like by like. So this is this segment and another segment. So for every segment, there's a scanning file. And in the end, you will need to merge all the files and do the splitting and make it machine learning ready. But here I just show you like a data set that is from a single line scanning. And you got this, but you have multiple scanning, which you need to further merge together. Then you have a point density that is greater than 1000. And here you can show it has different labels you can have, but I think this one is like the instance ID. So, but because I will only have one single tree. If you have multiple tree, you will see like how the instance ID changes. It's kind of like the UAV laser scanning. But if you want other mode, maybe you can help to expand this pipeline and do this. Yeah. Please try it out. Keep install CAMP3D, and yeah, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Great. And you know where to find the answer. So I think that's good. Any other questions from here or online?
I'm just curious because like the scenes are basically just generated from rescaling and rotating some sample of trees from an asset pool, right? How big is the asset pool actually?
I have some statistics. So like it has depends. So the asset pool can be divided into 3 levels. First, like the big trees, like in the canopy level, then the medium trees, and then the understory trees, like the samplings, like the very young trees. And what people typically build a game scene that for every group of different tree sizes, they have create like the different tree meshes of in order to like capture this representation. It's more like a sampling process. So how many tree assets you have typically depends on like what's the quality of the tree scenes, how detailed they have been doing to model the trees at different levels. But I think for the trees game scene that we have been using, I think it could kind of like about 30 tree meshes or 25 tree meshes according to different levels. And when you have the different combinations of the structure and also different variants, you can create more like structural variants.
So do you think the information value in the data set is coming from the combination of the rotation of the various tree samples and like resizing and like the various branch overlays instead of like the actual tree shape itself, because the corpus is pretty small, right?
Yeah. I think in my ablation studies, I just mentioned like we have this diversity, also data size scale. You can take the diversity as increasing more different tree meshes, but the data size scale as like we have the same size of tree meshes, same size thing, but we just generate more and more plots by changing the random seed, which is purely by adding this variant, structural variance. So I think the most significant contribution is from the diversity, which is you have more tree meshes and other things.
Have you tried if it's possible to generate a working synthetic data set with one tree mesh rotated and resized? So just one tree mesh.
So you need to do a segmentation. The segmentation is about distinguishing different trees. You only have one
but like
tree.
if you rotate if you rotate a tree a lot, then it will look different to a segmentation, right?
No, but you need at least two trees to distinguish between them, because you go instance 1, instance 2. You have, they could be the same.
Yeah, but if you're like scanning a point cloud, it would look not so similar because it has an angle to it, and you're capturing some face of the tree instead of.
That's still true, but nevertheless, you want to distinguish between these two trees, right? But they're close to each other. If you only have one tree, but everything the same instance ID, and that you're done.
Yeah, I'm just curious about like how little
The least would
diversity in
be,
trees.
so I think with the subtitles Frank did spread, we took just one, I think 5 trees. We created a forest with just 5 tree types. And it looked very much like a very real forest, but this is the same 5 trees rotated in place at different heights and sizes and so on and so on, different rotations, and it looked quite realistic. So the least you would do would be to have 2 trees generated with the same procedural generation next to each other, and then you kind of fly around it or something like that. And you might be able to get, and that would be the minimal thing at the end, right? Is that correct? I think we just 2 tree. 1 tree instance, 1 tree type, but 2 instances.
Yeah, if you want to do segmentation. But I mean, the demo contains only 1 tree.
Yeah.
You can download the demo, play with it, and let me know what's your
Put a
findings.
second tree in and see what.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that Yihan did very cleverly is that actually he told the story the way you're supposed to. You tell it, we do research backwards and tell it forwards, in the sense that he said, well, I got it, then let me tell you what happens if you had nodes, how well would it perform, just to see. But in fact, we started with nodes and we got terrible performance, 5%. F1, and it took a very long time to discover what's going on, and then we had to do a lot of work to actually get to the state where it's better. So I mean, when they presented it, saying, yeah, we just try it out and see, but it wasn't like that at all. So we always do our research. We tell it as if we were very smart. Actually, we're very dumb. At least I'm very dumb.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, we're pretty much at time, so let's stop here. Thanks very much, and